Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper and TireRack.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb. Welcome, everyone, to MotorWeek podcast number 344. I am indeed your host, John Davis, and welcome to a very special edition that we are recording on the press day of the 2025 Detroit Auto Show. Really, we're ending the first full week in January with a variety of automotive events that include not only the 2025 Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, but also some big doings in the Far East that we'll talk about later in the program. So we've got some fresh sheet metal to talk about and also some new technology that you'll soon be seeing in your vehicles. And with me today, our MotorWeek podcast team, digital producer Jessica Ray.
Hello, everyone.
And our staff writer, Alex Kellum.
Howdy. And
before we get into anything, I want to go to Jessica to talk about something very special that MotorWeek is doing this weekend. That's January 11th and 12th, Saturday and Sunday. Take it away, Jess.
Yeah, so we kind of felt inspired after this week of automotive reveals, or lack thereof, maybe, to kind of do a little bit of a retrospective on auto shows past.
Let you know what used to be the norm.
Yeah, so we've essentially compiled all of the episodes of MotorWeek from 1988 to 2006 that feature any sort of auto show footage. Some of them are not super long, maybe like 2-3 minutes, but some of them are 12 minutes. I think we used to do about 12-minute segments.
Yeah, we did.
So they're going to be shuffled on our YouTube channel all weekend long. We're going to be streaming it. Join us Saturday, 8 a.m. Eastern time. And
Thanks, Ben
hours.
Davis, for putting it all together, as he usually does, our MotorWeek retro guru.
Mm-hmm.
Should be a lot of fun. I mean, it's we'll talk about it later in the show what auto shows used to be for all you younger listeners to our podcast that may not quite get what we're talking about. But okay, let's start off with the here and now. Earlier this week in Las Vegas, the annual gigantic Consumer Electronics Show, which in recent years CES has stolen a lot of the headlines for vehicle introductions from traditional auto shows like Detroit. And I think you could argue they did it again this year, but certainly it's much more toned down. Mostly it was new Honda-associated rolling stock, starting with production versions of their next two EVs, two that will not be done with the help of General Motors, like the Honda Prologue and Acura ZDX. They're calling it the Zero Series, and they're saying these are thin, light, and wise designs. There's a sedan and an SUV. The sedan we actually saw at CES last year more in a prototype form. It shares the profile, if you had to say, has some Lamborghini in it with a raised tail. It maybe even looks a little bit like a Cybertruck. The SUV is pretty cut and dry, pretty normal, a little bulky in the back. But with that said, let me go back to you, Jessica, to get us rolling on the Zero Series. We don't know a whole lot more about it, but take it away what we do know.
I mean, like you said, this is going to be on a platform, the electric vehicle platform that Honda has developed in-house without help from GM. So this is kind of...
It's typical Honda. When they're behind the curve, they link up with somebody else for a while, while they develop their own tech.
Right. So this is developing that new or showing off the new EV architecture.
And they're going to be made in the U.S.
Yeah, they're going to be made here not here, but in Ohio at what Honda calls their EV hub, which isn't exactly shocking. But these are production models that are confirmed for 2026, so it's still going to be a while until we actually see them. But I will say they're definitely a polarizing look. For vehicles that they're telling us these technically still are prototypes, but they're saying these are close to production.
They're a lot more normal looking, say, than what they showed a year ago.
Yes, but they're still interesting, especially like the rear on both of them. They don't really have a lot of like window back there.
Makes you wonder if they're going to use all cameras.
I don't know the regulations on that, but I feel like you have to use that to supplement. Yeah. So they're all going to have an NACS port standard, so the North American Charging Standard, the Tesla plug, which is not shocking at all. Everybody's pretty much moving toward there. And like I said, we don't really have any details, but they do say that it's going to be like a by-wire system with a number of the components, like steering and suspension and braking. Yeah. And I think what's cool too is that they also have a new in-house operating system that they're developing, and they're going to premiere essentially called the Osimo operating system. So not a whole ton of
robot.
Yeah. So not a whole lot of like details on it, but it'll be. Wait, I don't know. I don't know what robot are you talking about?
I thought that was the name of the
forever ago
of the walking robot.
Yeah.
I need some context. I don't know.
No, there was. I think it was like decades ago. Yeah. There was a robotics project that they had unveiled. It was like over 20 years ago that used this name.
Thanks for making me feel really ancient.
You know,
but it was the first robot that attempted to walk like a human being. Mm-hmm. It was quite an achievement.
So lessons from that, and I'm sure just like the name itself is being used now.
I'm not sure about the spelling, but I know that's how you pronounce that. But what do you think, Alex, since you've got the microphone of these two, what do you think as far as their looks and the approach?
Well, when I saw them, the first thing I thought of was the HPX concept, which they recently did a restoration of and had at the Pebbles concourse, and they showed off. It's that wedge-shaped, I mean, that's the best way, I think, to describe especially the saloon. It's that wedge-shaped profile.
It's so 60s and 70s.
Yeah, it almost is like something you would see in like, well, at least a saloon, like in a Bond movie or like
low slung, wedge shape,
like not a real car, a real car, like a fictional car.
Well, it reminds me a lot of some of the Di Tommaso Pantera I used to own.
You know, definitely.
I'm sorry, Alex, cut you off.
No, please cut me off whenever. These thoughts are very empty. But no, for the most part, it's an interesting venture. I don't know. It doesn't do anything for me personally. But one thing to talk about also is that they want to have level 3 autonomous driving in these. That's going to be kind of
which is hands off
part of it. And they talk about how the driver will then be able to complete what they call a second task, which can be productive as joining a work meeting if you're a masochist like that, or it can be as productive as watching a movie. Ooh, so you can start doing that when you drive. And then they talked about the charging and being able to like, because of the operating system, because of all of this, if you're charging at home, which they think is about 80% of charging, it'll be able to charge. And we've seen stuff like this before, right? Where it'll charge when it's not peak hours, trying to save you costs, and then it can even feed energy back to the grid. So
that isn't very new.
No.
But while we're on the subject of Honda, the other vehicle that they showed, which was not new but got a few more details, is their co-design work with Sony. As a matter of fact, it's called the Sony Honda AFEELA, and it too has sort of a wedgy shape. The big news they made at CES is that they're going to try the direct from manufacturer to owner, with not having dealers in the middle. And the other big news was the astounding 6-figure price tags. So anybody want to take on the AFEELA and tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, first, I think the AFEELA probably looks most like a Lucid Air.
Yep, that's exactly what I was
like a smaller one, essentially.
Yep.
Because it's got that very like sleek, very rounded design. That's like that. It's true sedan.
Minimalist.
Got your minimalist. You've got the light bar in the front. Very, very simple design. It's the details on this are really interesting. So technically, the AFEELA does start under $100,000. It starts at $89,900. Unfortunately, that base trim won't be available till 2027. The first trims are the signature trims, and that's $102,000. And at launch in 2026, mid-2026, will only be available for sale in California.
Which makes sense.
That's the only market where
EVs are like 20+% of the sales.
And you know what's so funny about that is like you're like, oh, only for sale in
But they're
California.
going to make it in Ohio with the rest of the stuff.
Right, like the Zero Series that we just talked about.
Right.
So this would be a made in America car, which I think is definitely a good thing. They are targeting a 300-mile range with a 91 kilowatt hour battery.
That's still
pack.
nothing extraordinary to charge that much money for, and to make your dealers angry because you're going to bypass them with it.
It's true.
So.
I mean, the impressive thing here, we're partnered with Sony. Yeah. So Sony, huge in technology. The graphics inside are bound to be fantastic.
Yeah.
I remember when the concept first came out and people went crazy for it because the idea of playing PlayStation inside of your car was very enticing to a number of people.
Yeah, you don't need to be on Pimp My Ride anymore to get a PlayStation in your car. It's just there.
That's if you got kids and it's a long road trip.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a lot to expect in 26 from Honda and their partners on EVs. But let's move on to some of the rest of the stuff at CES. By the way, we will be going over the highlights of the Detroit Auto Show a little bit later once we finish up with CES. But a lot of CES always, because that's what CES is the newest in technology. But someone's going to have to explain to me what Toyota's Woven City was all about. It just seems almost, although it does seem a little bit like GM's used to do the cities of the future. So Toyota's Woven City.
I guess it's kind of like that. I mean, I'll take the lead again on this one.
Why not? You're our tech head.
I think it's a very cool concept, and essentially, like the way that Toyota words it, it's like a test course in mobility. Mm-hmm. And when they use the word mobility, obviously we're talking Toyota here, so transportation is obviously part of that. But they also want to explore not just cars and trucks and whatever, but the movement of people, of goods, ideas, information, energy. So
woven all together, which is the name.
Yes,
probably.
like all in a little city society. Right?
But also communicating with each other. So, the whole taking connectivity to the new heights.
Correct. And the idea is that, this city is made up of inventors. Right. These are people who are going to facilitate these studies and developments. So they actually, what I think is kind of cool, they took an old plant of Toyota's and they've essentially are building a little city around it. And so because it's like an old plant, the idea is that it'll have like manufacturing capacity. It'll have technologies there for startups and a number of companies to come in, live, work, develop, and essentially just study, which I think is really interesting. So the biggest news here is that phase 1 of construction has been completed. Nobody lives in the Woven City quite yet. They won't move in until next fall, and it'll only be about 100 residents, most of them being Toyota employees and their families.
Gosh, why does this sound like a Disney World project?
I mean, a little bit, but I mean, I think the concept is cool.
Interesting.
And
they are thinking way ahead. So.
Yeah. I don't know. Alex, do you have any thoughts on it?
I mean, any city that is planned ahead of time, and especially with different modes of transportation in mind, it's kind of like a big win to me. I always have reservations about like I wouldn't necessarily want to live in a city that is maybe owned by my employer kind of thing, but that doesn't apply to me.
That's an old thing, though. I mean, think about
true.
The industrialized age in America, turn of the century. You had all the cities where you had a big factory, and then they built housing for the workers. I mean, it's not a new concept, but here we go again.
I mean, think about it: cities and towns named after prominent families that were important in that area.
At that time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to get too dystopian with it. It's a cool concept.
But it's just it's essentially a modern version.
Moving into something, though, that's a lot closer to the here and now as far as affecting automotive drivers. About a year ago, BMW kind of surprised everybody by saying that they thought all of the screens inside cars were going to go away pretty soon and that everything would be projected up on the windshield like a windshield-wide head-up display. Well, now we've actually seen one how do you describe this BMW Panoramic iDrive?
It's interesting. Is
that what it is?
Well, no, this iteration is kind of reminiscent of the Lincoln, the screen Lincoln's been putting in their cars.
Nautilus.
In the Nautilus.
Which is a wall-to-wall.
It's like a wall-to-wall. But the Nautilus was pretty large, like tall, I should say. This is pretty slim and sits really kind of low. And you still have your tablet infotainment, central infotainment.
That's not what they're saying they're eventually going to go to.
Yeah, I mean, eventually. But this was previewing some of stuff from that original concept, but this is like the production. This is going to be showing up in their cars by the end of the year. So this is less
than what they were actually talking about, or a stepping stone maybe to what they're talking about.
I would say stepping stone. Because
so what's the big deal here?
So the big deal is that it's just newer tech that they're putting in their cars. With like customization and stuff. So again,
the Nautilus,
was
a big deal.
You can put more information on those screens that are maybe like relative for navigation purposes and stuff like that.
And entertainment.
Yeah. So.
And the other news that we took away from CES was Texas Instruments, the makers of an awful lot of chips, and they're simplifying chips that are going into cars. What do we know about that?
Yeah, so sort of one of the big examples that they gave was that they essentially want to use AI to replace like 6 sensors for like in-cabin safety features. So like occupant detection, right? Motion sensors or sensors within seats for, seat belts and airbags and stuff like that. And essentially they would use AI to go from 6 sensors to 1 sensor.
So we're decreasing the number of little computers that your car has.
Yes, so that decreases the complexity and cost. I mean, even the example they gave was on this is like on a smaller scale, but you're talking about going from $40 worth of sensors to about $20 worth of sensors. Yeah. So it's a big deal in the larger scheme of things.
And I know, Alex, you're a big critic of the complexities of all the electronics.
That's true, but I got to give a big shout out to Texas Instruments. Love your TI-84 calculator. Still have it from high school. Usually less chips is a bad thing because then you got to go to the store and then they got like 20 flavors of Doritos you got to pick. But in this case, less chips, good thing.
I wonder if are they the ones that used to make the calculators that advertise big green? We have big green numbers and little rubber feet. I think they were. Anyway, thank you all. That's CES for 2025. Hey, I want to thank our sponsors of this podcast and of our show, MotorWeek, Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper, and also the great folks over at TireRack.com. We know our viewers and our listeners appreciate your dedication to all things MotorWeek. Okay, let's head now from the relative warmth of Las Vegas to the always chilly climes of January in Detroit, where the Detroit Auto Show has returned to its traditional January dates after 2 years flirting with warmer weather. But no longer is it the dazzling international showcase of new product reveals. They're back to their basics. It's now a big, hands-on, consumer-driven auto show. Mind you, it's still a big one. It's a trend that we're seeing more and more. We saw it last year with the Paris Auto Show. They did make some news. The first was this morning when the North American Car and Truck and Utility of the Year awards were announced. And I have to admit, it was a little bit of a surprise. The 2025 North American Car of the Year is the Honda Civic Hybrid. The 2025 North American Truck of the Year is the Ford Ranger. And the Volkswagen ID Buzz took home the Utility Vehicle of the Year. And I should back up and just say that the Honda Civic was competing against the Kia K4 and the Toyota Camry. The Ford Ranger was competing against the new Dodge Ram 1500 pickup, full size, and the Toyota Tacoma. And the Utility Vehicle Award was between the Chevrolet Equinox EV, the Hyundai Santa Fe, and, of course, the Volkswagen ID Buzz, which won it. So, any comments on Civic, Ranger, ID Buzz winning those 3 categories? I have to admit, Civic was a little surprise to me.
I'm surprised on the Civic. And I say that as somebody who really likes the Civic. And we have a Civic hybrid in right now that we're driving, and I get it for the weekend, and I'm looking forward to it. But
I mean, both the K4 and the Toyota Camry just seem to me to take the car. I mean, the whole thing with North American Car, Truck, and Utility Awards is it's supposed to be a vehicle that advances that type of vehicle. And the K4 kind of took it into the compact car into a more luxurious, more stylish area. But Camry, which I have to admit was my vote, all-wheel drive available on all trims, hybrid powertrains across the board. I thought it stood out. But yet, to a lot of people and maybe to my fellow jurors, it was still too much of an appliance. I don't know. But I will say that some of the comments that were made by a couple of the jurors is said basically that the Civic just superb vehicle, highly efficient hybrid, always been one of the best compact sedans on the market, fun, fuel efficient, more elegant than ever. And the other comments all applauded the new Civic hybrids, taking a sporty compact and putting it into the more efficient area. I guess so. But any other comments?
I think the one thing I have an issue with the Civic Hybrid is that there's like a few things that are just missing compared to like the Camry. One thing that grinds my gears is there's no heated steering wheel.
It's funny you bring that. I had it last night, and I thought about that driving in this morning.
And
there's no heated steering wheel.
I hate to be that person. Now, I will say, if you're a Canadian, there is a heated steering wheel. Because I drove the Civic Hybrid in Canada, and they were like, the Canadians get the heated steering wheel because it's really cold up there. But we have a lot of parts of America that are very close to Canada, and I'm telling they're going to get snow in Georgia this today or tomorrow. So. And then the lack of all-wheel drive. So I do think there's like a flexibility in the Camry that is a little bit more than the Civic.
No, but it is a very. I also love the Civic, and the hybrid's a very competent vehicle. I was surprised at how quiet it is and how seamless the hybrid powertrain is. And it basically takes everything you love about the Civic, and especially with this recent Civic refresh, where it's a little bit stiffer and all of that. So it takes everything you love, and it just adds a hybrid powertrain. I would still go with the SI personally, but that's just me.
Ford Ranger, all new, and I think that probably had a lot to do with it winning the award up against the Ram 1500 and the Toyota Tacoma. And basically, looking at juror comments, they said, well, really, it's very affordable, and it really does all the work of a historic F-150, not what the F-150 is today. And others said, Ford is the truck leader, and when they do a new truck, it basically, pretty much know it's going to be a big hit. Anyone else surprised? I think around the office we sort of thought Ram might win.
I'm not terribly surprised because I do think the Ranger, this latest iteration, is very good. But I'm a little surprised actually it beat out Tacoma in a way, partially because of I know that Tacoma's priced a little higher than it was before.
But it's also the sales leader in that class.
Right, and I know a lot of people are looking at mid-size options now, and the Tacoma has so many different options, whether you want different cabs, different bed lengths, even different types of suspension that you want in there. I mean, the Tacoma has so many different options, and when you look at the Ranger lineup, which is good, it's streamlined. It's
going to be expanding.
Right, it's 3 main trims and then a Raptor, so they have that. I guess I'm not terribly surprised, but I did think Tacoma had a little bit of an edge there.
The one that I was not surprised about is Volkswagen ID Buzz. I just think the ID Buzz is such a standout vehicle. And mind you, anyone that thinks that the all-electric Volkswagen ID Buzz is just a minivan sort of misses the point. It does look like a minivan, but really it's possibly when you're Volkswagen's going to market it as a 3-row SUV, and with all the space on the inside, combine that with all the technology, I think that's apropos. The one thing that might have held it back was the range, which is only around 230 miles. But the juror comments basically were, hey, it's a decent range. It's got huge amount of space inside, very useful. And I I personally felt that it was just such an inspired design, and it did move the needle as far as automotive progress, I think. But anybody else surprised that it won? I mean, it's certainly the most expensive of the three. It was against the Chevrolet Equinox EV and the Hyundai Santa Fe.
I mean, I think it's a hard choice with all three of those, because I do think each one of them in their own way does something really well. The Equinox EV with its bargain price, the Santa Fe just completely revolutionizing what was otherwise kind of a boring nameplate into something exciting. Yeah. And then the ID Buzz, which is truly like a reincarnation of the old buses. No, I mean a hard choice. I think any of them could have won, and it have been a good choice. But I mean, you can't deny the cool factor of the ID Buzz.
I will say that the voting, looking at the voting totals, and I don't have all of them in front of me, but it looks like that none of the three ran away with the awards. So there's 50 jurors that are involved with picking North American Car and Truck and Utility of the Year. Let's move on to the really only new product news from the 2025 Detroit Auto Show, and that was Ford's reveal on Thursday night. So that was last night. We're recording this on Friday the 10th. And I'm going to turn it over to our Mustang aficionado here, Alex, to kind of talk about.
Oh, that's Ford's. Me? I thought Jessica was the Mustang aficionado.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. No, not me.
So, Alex, tell us what they showed and what you think the significance of the two vehicles are.
Yeah, we got two important things with the Mustang, or I'll say important, but one arguably.
They are. I think they are.
Yeah.
With Ford being such an EV-oriented company these days, I think these are very important.
This is them stepping up to say that enthusiasts, like the purist enthusiasts, we hear you. We've got options for you. They want to continue that
with internal combustion engines.
With internal combustion, yeah. The first one I'll talk about because it's a little more, it's the one that they technically revealed first, and also it's a little more exclusive, is a new Spirit of America package for the Mustang GTD. If you don't know what the Mustang GTD is, look it up. It will knock your socks off. It is incredible. It's arguably the most potent Mustang they've ever made, and it recently ran a sub 7-minute lap time
at Nürburgring.
The Nürburgring Nordschleife, which is pretty insane. It is the only American production car to do so, which is pretty wild.
Was it? I've forgotten. Is it 14 miles long or whatever?
It's
a long way.
I think it's
huge
22
drive.
Miles long.
It might be. It's whatever it is. I've driven it. I've driven it numerous times in the past, but it's not a walk in the park.
It has been called the Green Hell for a reason. Yeah. It is an arduous course, but the GTD did it, and so this new edition, not only does it pay homage to the fact that they did complete their goal, it also pays tribute to Craig Breedlove, which is a name that you may know from the Land Speed Records. He hit 500 and 600 miles per hour. I guess he decided 500 was not fast enough. He had to go 600. And of course, he did that in a jet-powered racer, just a crazy thing that's not a Mustang, but it is about the American need for speed, right? That ingenuity to go fast. And it is kind of funny in a way that, like, when you think of in a traditional sense, like, American cars were about the power, right? And, you know, maybe foreign makes were all about the handling and the lightness and the agility.
This modern GTD sort of combines both. And by the way, it's 12.9 miles.
12.9. Well, I was only 10 off. So if you think about it, you know.
No, it's 20 kilometers.
20 kilometers.
Okay,
that's what you want.
20-ish kilometers.
So I'm speaking to the global audience then. Thank you very much. But yeah, heavy hitters like the GTD and even your standard GT and EcoBoost, show that handling is there. Real quick, Spirit of America, what it really does to the GTD, it's a white, red, and blue kind of livery, adds a couple goodies
like Craig Breedlove used to
just like his overalls, which is pretty rad.
That's right.
And you get like the carbon.
I told
pack.
you were our historian.
Well, I read a lot of things and I occasionally write them down. So I've got a lot of. I am an encyclopedia of often useless knowledge, but I've got some. With this job, it's useful.
I could see Craig standing there now with his whatever he had around his neck, waving in the wind, and those overalls, red, white, white, and blue.
Now, if you're wondering how much this package costs, they didn't put the price out there. And honestly, if you have to ask, it's probably not for you. The GTD is going to start somewhere around $325,000, which is, I believe, before you add the performance pack. Yes, there's a performance pack for this car. The Spirit of America comes with that. But here's something that theoretically any of us could go out and buy. Ford announced an RTR EcoBoost Mustang. Now, if you don't know the terminology a little bit here, I'll break it down. EcoBoost, that's the 4-cylinder. It's a 2.3-liter turbo 4. RTR stands for Ready to Rock. That's what it stands for. Yeah.
Oh, man.
This is a company, the main guy, driver, president, etc., Vaughn Gittin Jr., he is a Formula Drift champion. And I believe for about 18 years now, they have partnered with Ford and done various things. He has drifted Mustangs ad nauseum. They have made tons of parts for him. And you can even send your Mustang off to the RTR Wizards, and they will do some cool stuff to it in various specs. But this is something that Ford is going to build in volume.
A factory car.
Exactly. And it is based off of the EcoBoost. Now, unfortunately, they did not give out all the performance specs, and by all, I mean any. There's nothing there. And I got to be honest with you, when you see the pictures of it, it's all camouflaged up. And when I first saw it, I just thought that was the paint job, because RTR does these wild things. You can tell it's an RTR by the signature LED lights around the nostrils in the front. That is something they started with the S550 generation. People have used it all over their cars now. That's a big thing. Lots of styling stuff here. Odds are this is going to build off of the pre-existing performance pack. So just to go over some of the specs real quick, EcoBoost, I said a 2.3-liter turbo 4. That's a 315 horsepower, 350 pound-feet of torque. The performance pack adds like a limited slip diff. You get 255 wide tires on all 4 corners, strut bracing, chassis tuning, better brakes. They also said this is going to borrow parts from the Dark Horse, which we tested about a year ago at Roebling.
Which is just an amazing car.
So they didn't say exactly what it's going to get. If I had to guess, it's possible we'll see the magnetic ride suspension there. We might see the additional cooling that you get with the Dark Horse, things like that, the steering ratio. Again, there's not a whole lot of details here. But this is something for the enthusiasts. What I really hope they do, and I know they won't now that I'm saying it out loud, if you don't know, the EcoBoost, which you could currently get, or I'm sorry, you previously could get with the MT82 manual, that is no longer the case anymore. You cannot get a manual with it. It would be great if that line that says Dark Horse parts also included the Tremec that you could get, the manual transmission. And I know it's like the last 5 podcasts we've talked about cars, and I've been like, ooh, what about a manual? What about a manual? I don't want to be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy for a second.
That's an awful heavy-duty transmission for that engine, though.
It is. And if they just put an MT82 in it, it'd be fine. It would be fine. But that's the car. It's pretty rad. I'm sure it'll come with the drift brake, by the way. I should mention that. That's the most obvious thing.
Of course.
That drift brake is sweet.
So please, if you buy it, do not perpetuate the Mustang stereotype. Be responsible and be safe.
And besides, the tires will cost you a fortune.
Be very careful when you leave the cars and coffee, folks.
That pretty much sums up the big product news from Detroit. And I must say that's pretty thin.
Well, I mean, John, our podcast was originally scheduled this afternoon.
Right.
And we decided to move it to the morning because...
Hopefully we didn't miss anything.
But there was nothing on the schedule all week from press conferences other than NACTRA.
However, I should say that, auto shows, I've been a champion a long time for auto shows being what they really need to be, which is, things for consumers to be able to come in and really see a lot of vehicles and make their choices, especially in cold weather, which is why they have so many of them in the wintertime. And I applaud the folks in Detroit for going back to their January dates and going back to basics, because while a lot of manufacturers decided they weren't going to spend any corporate money on going to Detroit this year, and they've not spent a lot of money in the last few years, the dealers have stepped up. So if you go there and you're looking for an Asian brand, you will be able to take a look at them, sit in them, and talk to somebody about them. Moreover, the European brands, especially the premium brands like Mercedes and BMW, the dealers have stepped up to make sure that you will get a total automotive experience. Plus, there's umpteen test tracks and everything else there. So I won't say that Detroit has reinvented the auto show, but they have indeed gone back to what auto shows really before the 1990s were all along, which is big consumer-driven events where you can basically take off your heavy coat and have a chance to just look at everything side by side. And I applaud them for doing that. It doesn't mean auto shows are going to go away. It just means those of us in the press may not necessarily find something newsworthy there anymore. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ford, for giving us the news that we did get last night. Speaking of news and speaking of everything else that we do here on Motor Week, in case you don't know, there is a relatively now new way to get information about and see all of our videos. It's our MotorWeek app. It was new last summer, so we're about 6-7 months old now. It's available from your favorite app store. It works on all the popular phones and tablets. Moreover, it's 100% free. And you also get something very special along with all of our videos and features. It includes a very unique EV Everything tab that allows you to quickly search the specs of every electric vehicle for sale now, both new and used. Also coming very soon in the next month or so, you will have a tab called EV Expanded, where we'll be giving more basic information for people that are new to the EV world on things like charging and range and how to maximize the efficiency. So the MotorWeek app, it's free. Go to your app store and download it today, and with it, you will never miss a mile of MotorWeek. I want to talk just for a minute about what's going on in the Far East this week as far as new vehicles. There's something called the 2025 Tokyo Auto Salon, and it is very much like our SEMA, the specialty equipment event that's held every fall in Las Vegas. And there was some new information on some new hardware there. Honda showed an updated Honda Prelude concept, which they've already said is going to be marketed soon and come here. Also, there's a new Civic model, Type R, that's a special edition that's coming out. No word that this racing black package will make it here or not. And they've done some updated work with the Toyota GR Yaris, the Gazoo, which they're also going to race at Nürburgring. So that was kind of interesting. And I don't know if anyone would like to talk about it, but there's also news from Tesla out of China.
Yes, we have finally got a first look at a pretty well, I don't know that it's necessarily redesigned, but refreshed
refresh
of the Model Y.
Yeah.
And it is different. It is different. And, you know, the Model 3 just this year also got a nice little exterior and interior refresh as well.
But not this thorough.
No, I mean, the styling is very different. You have
For Tesla.
I mean,
in that it's actually got a face.
It does. It has a face. I'm almost like trying to figure out a way to explain the way the face looks compared to the old one. I would say it's more attractive.
Well, it's got, what's the big feature?
We have a big light bar on the front now. So
More
it's
defined lines.
Pretty, defined lines. It's very distinctive. I will say, I hate to compare it to this, but it kind of looks like a Hyundai Kona a little bit. It's basically like if you merge the old Model Y with a Hyundai Kona, and that's what you got. Because like when you look at like the silhouette, it's, I think Alex said this earlier, it's a little less jelly beanie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a little bit more defined. But it still has, like, if you look at it probably from like a 3/4 rear shot, because it's also got like a tail light bar going on. In the back, you're like, okay, that's a Tesla. Like, that's a Model Y. But from the front, you're like, oh, okay, that's a little bit different. And it's definitely a departure from their styling.
And I think it bolsters their largest SUV to make it a little more appealing because the Model X has kind of been taking all the sales. So they've kind of pushed the Y up a little bit, if you will, made it more desirable.
I mean, you got to make them look a little different because I swear sometimes I
You don't
can't
know
even
what
tell them apart.
exactly.
And they don't have badges on them really anymore either. But they call this the Juniper. That's like the generation or its name.
I'll take your
the
word
Model
for it.
Y Juniper.
I'll take your word for it. Coming here. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Alex, I didn't ask you any comment about it. You've seen the pictures of the Y.
I have, yeah.
I spoke for him actually.
Yeah, yes, you did actually.
Yeah.
So, and I appreciate
was thinking
that.
that maybe you
I thought his
jump
mouth was
in.
moving while I was hearing you, but no.
No, you'll know when I'm yapping. Yeah. No, I don't really have any thoughts on it. I mean, I think maybe they take some of the angles from the Cybertruck and decided, hey, we could apply that to something else, but not too much.
No one's mentioned it, but I think the face looks like a Lucid.
I think everybody's going in that way.
Yeah.
Like that's the style. That's that
light bar.
because you know what looks just like that? The Lucid. What did we just talk about? The AFEELA. The new Hyundai Sonata.
But you know, that's not been what Tesla's done before. They always said, styling doesn't really matter, and we're going to make this simple. And now they've kind of like, well, you know what? We need to do something to freshen this up and maybe appeal to people now that there's more competition. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anywho, rants and raves before we close it out. Anybody got anything that over the Christmas holidays?
I got one, but Jess, you mentioned one, I think yesterday.
Oh, and maybe it's appropriate for a podcast where we're talking about technology in cars and such. I find myself, I used to be like on the cusp of technology. I loved seeing new technology in phones
part of your job
and
description.
computers. Part of my job, being social media, staying up to date on all the latest information. But more and more, I feel like we're getting to a point where technology is just being put in cars just for the heck of it and not for its like actual active usefulness
or helping things.
Yes.
Yeah.
For example, personally, I don't like electronic releases for doors.
Oh, you must have been reading the same article I read over. I just read a tirade from somebody talking about, the situation, and we don't know if it was true or not, the 12-volt battery died and the doors were locked and he had a child inside. And they eventually had to basically break the window to get into it. And this tirade went on talking about just why are we making door handles so complicated? Why do door handles need a circuit board?
I think there's just...
It was interesting.
There are things that, why are we taking the mechanical way out of it, right?
That works so well.
Meanwhile, you got Porsche. They'll replace your door handle with a piece of rope, and you'll pay more for it.
That's true.
Good point.
Well,
Good point.
and maybe that's I don't want to say that's like a silly example, but I think like a more a better example is the rear windows are getting smaller and smaller as we're kind of moving toward coupe. And kind of the coupish styling
Right.
on a lot of cars. So cars that had decent visibility no longer have them. Right. And so now we're supplementing that with cameras. And sometimes we're not supplementing it with cameras. I'll give an example of a car that has a small rear window and no supplemental camera, a Volvo C40. Mm-hmm. But then look at the Polestar 3. That doesn't have a rear window at all. We didn't really mention it, but the Honda 0 Series, they have pretty small rear glass. Mm-hmm. So it's why are we making things more difficult and adding more technology in the cars when it doesn't make sense to me. Logically, that doesn't make sense to me. So that's my rant.
Alex, anything to add? You've been smiling the whole time.
To her thing, no, I agree. I'm starting.
We talked about this, unfortunately, the both of us at nauseam.
No. Well, do you have something that you were going to talk about? You said you gave way to
I have a rant,
all right.
And it's on behalf of my father who did emissions testing yesterday. This happened yesterday, and. Let me preface this.
We should say that we're in Maryland. That is in the Baltimore metro area. That is a requirement
every 2 years. Yeah. And for the record, I like emissions testing. I think it's a good thing. I think it's good that we do it. That's not the issue. But they have it where there are self-serve kiosks now. Right. And I think you can pay less to do. I think if you go
it's
through
$10
there,
versus $14.
$14. So my dad, he was asking me to do it, and I'm busy, believe it or not. And I have a social life outside of work, and I didn't have time to do it in his Mustang. So he said, I'll go do it. He drove there, he said, I'm not going to do the kiosk. I'll get in lane. Gets in lane, no line, gets right in. And the person looks at his OBD port, then goes inside the office for like a minute or two, comes back out and says, I'm sorry, I can't do your car because your OBD port is dangling. And my dad's like, so apparently it was loose and they can't do it. And my dad wasn't mad about it. He said, okay, that's fair. You got a rule. You got to follow it. That's cool. So my dad pulls into the parking lot and is like, how's it loose? Like, did it break? Something, whatever. No, it's a plastic clip that holds it into the side. Like, pops it back in, no problem. Pulls back in the lane. Sorry, we can't test your car. It's dangling. And he's like, no, I fixed it. No, we can't do that because it's dangling. No, I fixed it. They look at it. We can't do your car today. Sorry. So he pulls in the parking lot, goes inside, talks to I guess what would be the manager. Hey, explains the situation. And she just keeps saying, well, it's dangling. We can't do that. And he's like, no, you don't understand. I fixed it. So she's like, let me go out and see your car. Brings it, outside. Okay, open the door. Look at that. Is that dangling? No. Okay. So can I get it tested? No, you can't get it tested today because it was dangling. And he's like,
so he knows you can't get it tested twice on the same day, but yeah. I've done that. So
then my dad says, so what stopped me from going to the kiosk? You wouldn't have known if I went to the kiosk. Right. And they were like, oh, nothing. You could go do that right now. Oh. So my dad paid $14 instead of $10 to go do the self-service because he's like, I'm not going to drive all the way back up here to do this. Their rationale, and look, I do get it. I get where they're coming from, is that if a part is dangling, it could be busted, and if they plug their thing into it, they could break it more, and that could cause issues. Again, no issue with the rule. That's fine. But why's it got to be like this? He fixed it. It's right there. It's
I don't understand. I guess it must be some rule that they can't test the same vehicle on twice in the same day because I have done years ago when they first started the emissions testing. I went in and failed, and it was this is back in the 80s, I think. And I took and the guy said it's probably because your air cleaner is dirty. So I rolled out, went down to the auto parts store, got another air cleaner, stuck it in there, and came back. I was 20 minutes and went right through and passed. Now, that was a long time ago. Maybe
was that like before computers were monitoring it?
I don't think this car had any computers on it at all. So I'm just wondering if that's the reason that they can't test a car twice in 24 hours.
And that's where I was thinking. If they had just said, hey, sorry, it's like a state thing. We got to wait 24 hours.
But they didn't give you an explanation.
Right, exactly. It was dangling. It's like, what?
Wait a second. So, but the thing is, they didn't even test it. You said they didn't test it because it was dangling. They didn't even plug it in.
They gave him a piece of paper that said, sorry, we couldn't test your car because the OBD was dangling. Again.
Oh, yeah. It's probably just one of those dumb, silly, bureaucratic rules.
So it's a bureaucratic thing that makes no common sense.
So go to the kiosk.
Welcome to the 21st century.
And they only got one kiosk. Have like 3.
Yeah,
I know. I don't know why they don't have more self-serve kiosks. Because
I've used it several times.
They're super handy. Except for last time I tried to do the Jeep, it was like, no, your car. It just didn't like it one day. But then like the time before, it was like fine. I mean, the car's not that old.
It's got beef.
Yeah, apparently it has beef.
Very good rants from both of you. Okay. Thank you, Jessica Ray. Thank you, Alex Kellum. Thanks, everybody out there, for listening to our podcast today. Hey, if you are wondering what time MotorWeek can be seen on your local public television station, go to our website, motorweek.org, click on the tab Watch MotorWeek, enter your zip code for the days and times in your area, or you can hop over to our cable partner, mavtv.com, for their schedule. You can also watch MotorWeek and other fine PBS programming anytime, anywhere on the free PBS app. Download the PBS app now on your smartphone, tablet, or smart TV. Put it right next to the new MotorWeek app, and you'll never miss a mile of MotorWeek. All of the individual road tests and feature segments, as well as our marathon of auto show classics, are on youtube.com/MotorWeek. Be sure to catch that marathon this weekend, which is the 11th and 12th of January 2025. Folks, if you've got a screen, you can watch MotorWeek. Thanks to our producer, Jessica Ray, audio engineer, Jillian Cookman, podcast creator, Bob Mixter. Happy New Year, everybody, and thanks for being a part of MotorWeek.
You have been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper and TireRack.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.